Journal continues.
We have an hour here with two guests who are rejoining us here. We're going to talk with Christopher Hitchens of Vanity Fair. Good morning.
Morning.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk with David Frum, an author and a member of the Manhattan Institute. Good morning to you.
Thank you.
What are you reading today?
Well, the first story that caught my eye was the story that was in both the Washington Post and the Washington Times. A team of Columbia University researchers has come up with some disturbing findings about the rising incidence of child poverty. This is one of these stories that is a profound trend in American life, but somehow never seems newsworthy enough to actually break through the usual noise of the broad trends. Here's what they found. The percentage of children in poverty is up sharply over the past 20 years, and numbers here are probably better than statistics. That in 1975 there were 3.5 million children living in poverty, and today there are 6 million children living in poverty. Now what's striking, and the reason to look at both stories, is that the two newspapers implicitly give, the Washington Post and the Washington Times, different explanations of why this is so. And in a way...
This is the Times story we're looking at, by the way.
Okay. And in a way it sort of sums up a lot of the ideological debate in America about what is going wrong with the country. The Washington Post story follows the Columbia researchers in believing that the main problem is the declining rate of pay, at least that's available to the less skilled, that it's more difficult for less skilled people to find work, so they are poor and therefore their children are poor. The Washington Times story emphasizes that it's family status that has everything to do with it, that of the children who are poor, only 8% of poor children live with a married mother and father. 92% live either with parents who are living together common law, which is usually a very short-term arrangement, or in single-parent households. And so that you've got the statistical evidence, the facts right there, to come up with whichever view you like. Is that child poverty is a result of changes in the labor market? Child poverty is the result of changes in American family structure.
Christopher Hitchens, I'll give you a chance to respond to that, and you have a different interest this morning as well.
Got to be said that there's something superficially plausible about shortage of money as an explanation for poverty, though, I think. I mean, I've always felt, I mean, and given all the I won't give it its right name, all the nonsense talked about family values, or the incessant stress placed on them, it is still a pretty amazing reproach that the number of children living in absolute poverty should be going up in the way that it has done. In Sweden a few years ago, the country I think probably most disliked by the American right, maybe even more than Cuba, I sometimes think, it was found that you could take a child out of a class in any school at random and run the ruler over it, its teeth, its skin, its calcium, rate of growth, and all that kind of thing. And having run the ruler over it, you could make no guess at all about the social class or occupation of its parents. That's what I would call a social democratic achievement. Imagine how far one is in America from being able to do that. You can tell more or less at a glance what the social class origins of a lot of people are. Just a thought. I must say I don't think it's necessarily an antithesis what you put forward at the opening. Because poverty is very often a cause of family breakup, as is joblessness among males. And I think that it may be a distinction without a difference to suggest that one is a cultural and one is a social cause of misery among our children.
Actually, but family breakup seems to be bigger. That there were 7.5 million children altogether born out of wedlock in the United States last year, many of them to non-poor people. I agree with Christopher Hitchens. This is maybe one of the top 2 or 3 things that Americans should be worrying about. I mean, that a quarter of the country's children are growing up poor, and as Christopher Hitchens says, that means that they're never going to be as tall. That means they're never going to be as clever because they're not fed properly when they're young. I mean, it has huge implications for the society.
And they're not going to be very good parents, either.
And they're not going to be very good parents.
Let's get some more issues and more articles on the table here, but first we want to re-invite the viewers to phone in with their questions, comments, anything they're seeing in their papers around the country. We'll put the split lines on the screen again for you. Talk for a couple more minutes and then start taking your phone calls. Our guests this morning are David Frum, who is the author of this book right here. It's titled What's Right? Came out earlier this year, right? How's it doing?
doing actually not too bad. I'm always, I say that with sort of a pleasant surprise. I always expect that these things are going to vanish without a trace. But it seems to be selling in its niche reasonably briskly.
I prefer the title of the last one, I must say. Which was, by the way, dead, right?
That's right.
And Christopher...
Which I always kept hoping would be more prescient than it actually was.
Now you, Christopher Hitchens, just got back from overseas.
I did.
Where were you and why did you go?
Well, actually, it's not all that. Last week, just before Thanksgiving, I was in Cyprus, which I think is a very important subject, very much off the American radar screen at the moment, but I predict about to come back. The situation in Cyprus is deteriorating, I believe. The overall rivalry between Greece and Turkey is intensifying, but the situation in Cyprus itself is intensifying independently. The Turkish position is becoming much harder. They've just adopted what I would describe as a shoot-to-kill policy against people who protest against the Turkish partition of the island. 3 people were killed over the summer in cold blood as a result. And it's one of those stories that everyone feels they know and has been filed away on them. Actually, you can't file something on a back burner, can you? But you know what I mean. Has been stored and looked like a permanent petrified stalemate, but in fact the stalemate is becoming unstable, and so I went to have a look at that and try and update my book on the subject.
And you mentioned that it's sort of a small arms build-up among 2 NATO countries.
Yes, there's a local arms race going on, which should concern your viewers probably more than it does, in that the United States is the principal supplier of heavy weaponry to both sides. Both of the rivals in this case are members of the NATO alliance, and the United States, as the biggest exporter of military hardware around the world, is the armorer of both. In fact, it also ought to be better known, in my opinion, that Turkey violates the United States Foreign Assistance Act by using aid and military material given to it for its own defense for the occupation and colonization of northern Cyprus.
And we know you have an article that you brought to the table here out of Zaire this morning. What's on your mind?
Yes, sorry, still to keep people overseas, but another thing that surprises me, because it's a thing one could have seen coming at least a year ago, is the implosion of the Mobutu regime in Zaire. Probably the worst regime in probably the richest, potentially most successful country in Africa. And once again, very much United States responsibility. General Mobutu was imposed upon Zaire by the Central Intelligence Agency a long time ago. He and his army and his appalling regime are our business, and they've got a very short time now, I would say, to live or to survive. Live in the case of Mobutu because he's dying of cancer, and survive in the case of the regime because it is a one-man despotism, and its army is trained only to fight its own civilians and is now gradually collapsing in the eastern provinces as the rebels get nearer the capital. If I was Mr. Anthony Lake, I would be calling urgent briefings at my new CIA to find out what went wrong and begin the inquest now.
Stay overseas just for a minute here. Actually, the Chinese defense minister was in town yesterday, made a speech, got a pretty decent amount of coverage. Front page in the Washington Times here. This gentleman defended the 1989 attack on Tiananmen Square and actually claimed no one was killed in the bloody confrontation, as he points out here. Any response to what you've seen?
It's all a big misunderstanding. I have to say that I would, if I were a front page editor, I would not put Chinese, I would not regard Chinese communist thinks it's okay to kill people as a front page story. That strikes me as a dog bites man story. If you found a Chinese communist who thought it wasn't okay to kill people, that would be a front page story.
I'm amazed at the hold that the Chinese seem to be able to exert over Washington, and the way that this must be the third administration running that they've managed to humiliate, that's come into office saying, look, we really do intend to make human rights a priority in our China policy, and then has reversed itself. Now we have to, apparently this guy got quite a sort of warm reception wherever he spoke too, was treated, you know, as an honored guest. I think it's a bit much.
He was, according to this article, shunned by most Republican members of Congress, though, during a breakfast reception on Capitol Hill that was
attended. Well, that's probably
most
because it's the Democrats' turn to be groveling to China. It would have been the other way around if it had been the Bush administration.
What else are you reading?
The Republican Party won control of the Texas Texas State Senate for the first time since Reconstruction. That's a story on page 2 of this morning's Washington Post. I think it's in the Washington Times as well.
Got the Times story here.
This is big